Alright, this is indeed my second time filming this, but hello everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to the first episode of Pocket Size Podcasts. Today we will be learning about the sinking of the USS Maine and why it led to a war. So let's jump right in. So why did this start in the first place? What was the crisis here? The sinking of the Maine was our crisis. That's our starting point. That's like the inciting incident of this whole story. That's going to be the sinking of this US battleship was significant because it started a war between the US and Spain, creatively named the Spanish-American War, as you might know. The Maine was sunk in Cuban waters by an unknown explosion. The Maine was sent to Cuba to protect American values after riots had broken out earlier in the year. The explosion was the result of an unknown mine being detonated aboard the ship. While a Navy judge deduced that no one person or nation was responsible for the detonation, U.S. public opinion was that the Spanish had set off the mine. After diplomatic communications didn't solve the matter, the U.S. moved forward with a formal declaration of war. Historical context here was, why did the U.S. get involved at all? And like I said before, the Cubans were fighting for their independence from the Spanish, and President William McKinley ordered the USS Maine to Cuba to protect U.S. political and economic interests on a nearby island, as to not totally interfere. What were the choices available to William McKinley? Those would have been to start war and not to start war. So if he had chosen to start war, some of the pros would be many Americans were backing him at the time because they believed that the Spanish had indeed detonated the mine on board the USS Maine. The US was trying to state itself as a big power in the world, and the war would allow them to do so. And some of the US businesses had stake in Cuba, such as the sugar and tobacco industries, and they saw the potential economic benefits / growth that the war would provide them with. Some cons, so not to start war, would be the unclear beginnings of the explosion and not knowing if Spain had actually put the bomb aboard the USS Maine. So there were a few skeptics, obviously. Another one would be the losses would be a big con because both Spanish and American soldiers would be injured, wounded, or killed, and as well as Cuban civilians might be killed, wounded, or injured as well, which would be obviously terrible and was terrible. Starting a war could have negative repercussions on the US's reputation and relationships with other countries, which was the opposite of what they were trying to do with beginning that formal declaration of war. The president handled the crisis by, like I said before, starting the war, formally declaring it. The House voted 311 to 6 in favor, and the Senate voted 42 to 35 in favor as well. The House was clearly a bit more keen to get on with the war than the Senate, but it passed nonetheless, and we went to war with Spain for about 10 weeks. And what happened was Cuba gained their independence, the US and Spain signed the Treaty of Paris, and Theodore Roosevelt had been recognized as a war hero as well as a credible politician. He obviously became president at a later date, so this probably was that kicking off point. Some of the long-term outcomes were, like I said, the war ended Spanish colonization in the Americas as a whole, so not just in Cuba, but South America as well. And the US emerged as a world power with control of several countries, such as Cuba, the Philippines, and Guam. So it ended Spanish rule in the Philippines as well, so that was a big plus as well. What would I have done personally knowing what I know now? I think I would have also chosen to go to war because the pros far outweigh the cons if I'm looking at it from like a politician stance. I would have chosen it because the American people were backing it, so I wouldn't have much public outcry or much backlash from that. The American businesses were already in favor that were in the sugar and tobacco markets. They would have profited from the war as well. And then, as I know now, the US got recognized as a world power and was shown more as a nation than a set of colonies. So that was a big plus as well. And that concludes the USS Maine and how it started a war. I hope you enjoyed this little podcast. I plan to do a bunch of these because they're super fun and super fun to research. I'm just a little bit of history buff, and so yeah, I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something, most importantly. And I will see you guys next time with the tragic story of the Rocky Flats plutonium plant, which was very interesting as well. Goodbye, guys.